Hi everyone, this is Miss Shibley. Happy Tuesday. As I promised, we're going to be reading Charlotte's Web going into our next chapter. Before we start reading, I just want to do a recap of the story so far. So we are reading Charlotte's Web, and it is about a girl named Fern who saw a very cute pig named Wilbur, and Wilbur was the runt of the family. And in order to save Wilbur, Fern decided to rescue him and make sure that he was brought healthy, he was gained the weight, he ate. And then when Wilbur got big and plump and was a few weeks old, they sold him to Zuckerman's farm, where he was lost and he was afraid and he was scared. And he was able to meet new friends, like his animal friends, like our friend Templeton, who is the farm rat. And then Wilbur met a very special friend named Charlotte, and Charlotte was an 8-legged black spider. And they were not probably the most ideal friendship, but they are a very special friendship. Now, some of the animals got into Wilbur's head, and they were telling him mean, nasty things. And they told Wilbur that he was going to get sold. He was going to go away. And Wilbur was scared. He ran away. He tried to run away. He tried to go to the forest. He was so frightened. And Charlotte is telling Wilbur to calm down. So we are going to see what happens in our next chapter. So now that we're all caught up, we are now ready to read Charlotte's Web. So, Wilbur's boast. Here we go. A spider's web is stronger than it looks. Although it is made of thin, delicate strands, a web is not easily broken. However, a web gets torn every day by the insects that kick around in it, and a spider must rebuild it when it gets full of holes. Charlotte liked to do her weaving during the late afternoon, and Fern liked to sit nearby and watch. One afternoon, she heard a most interesting conversation and witnessed a strange event. "You have awfully hairy legs, Charlotte," said Wilbur, as the spider busily worked at her task. "My legs are hairy for a good reason," replied Charlotte. "Furthermore, each leg of mine has 7 sections: the coxa, the trochanter, the femur, the patella, the tibia, the metatarsus, and the tarsus." Wilbur sat bolt upright. "You're kidding," he said. "No, I'm not either." "Say those names again. I didn't catch them the first time." Coxa, trochanter, femur, patella, tibia, metatarsus, and tarsus. "Goodness," said Wilbur, looking down at his own chubby legs. "I don't think my legs have 7 sections. "Well," said Charlotte, "you and I lead different lives. You don't have to spin a web that takes real leg work." "I could spin a web if I tried," said Wilbur, boasting. "I've just never tried." "Let's see you do it," said Charlotte. Fern chuckled softly, and her eyes grew wide with love for the pig. "Okay," replied Wilbur. "You coach me and I'll spin one. It must be a lot of fun to spin a web. How do I start?" "Take a deep breath," said Charlotte, smiling. Wilbur breathed deeply. "Now climb to the highest place you can go to, like this." Charlotte reached up to the top of the doorway. Wilbur scrambled to the top of the manure pile. "Very good," said Charlotte. "Now make an attachment with your spinnerets. Hurl yourself into space and let out a drag line as you go down." Wilbur hesitated for a moment, then jumped out into the air. He glanced hastily behind to see if a piece of rope was following him to check his fall. But nothing seemed to be happening in his rear, and the next thing he knew, he landed with a thump. "Oomph," he grunted. Charlotte laughed so hard her web began to sway. "What did I do?" asked the pig when he recovered from his bump. "Nothing," said Charlotte. "It was a nice try." "I think I'll try again," said Wilbur cheerfully. "I believe what I need is a little piece of string to hold me." The pig walked out to his yard. "You there, Templeton," he called. The rat poked his head out from under the trough. Got a little piece of string I could borrow? Asked Wilbur. I need it to spin a web. Yes, indeed, replied Templeton, who saved string. No trouble at all. Anything to oblige. He crept down into his hole, pushed the goose egg out of the doorway, and returned with an old piece of dirty white string. Wilbur examined it. That's just the thing, he said. Tie one end to my tail, will you, Templeton? Wilbur crouched low with his thin, curly tail toward the rat. Templeton seized the string, passed it around the end of the pig's tail, and tied 2 half hitches. Charlotte watched in delight. Like Fern, she was truly fond of Wilbur, whose smelly pen and stale food attracted the flies that she needed, and she was proud to see that he was not a quitter. He was willing to try again to spin a web. While the rat and the spider and the little girl watched, Wilbur climbed again to the top of the manure pile, full of energy and hope. Everybody watch, he cried, and summoning all his strength, he threw himself into the air. Head first, the string trailed behind him, but he had neglected to fasten the other end to anything. It didn't really do any good, and Wilbur landed with a thud, crushed and hurt. Tears came into his eyes. Templeton grinned. Charlotte just sat quietly. After a bit, she spoke. You can't spin a web, Wilbur, and I advise you to purr the idea out of your mind. You lack 2 things needed for a spider to spin. Well, what are they? Asked Wilbur sadly. You lack a set of spinners, and you lack the know-how. But cheer up, you don't need a web. Here are the cute little pictures. Here's Templeton with Wilbur, and here's Wilbur trying with all of his might to spin a web. But cheer up, you don't need a web. Zuckerman supplies you with 3 big meals a day. Why should you worry about trapping food? Wilbur sighed. You're ever so much cleverer and brighter than I am, Charlotte. I guess I was just trying to show off. Serves me right. Templeton untied his string and took it back to his home. Charlotte returned to her weaving. You needn't feel too badly, Wilbur, she said. Not many creatures can spin webs. Even men aren't as good as spiders, although they think they're pretty good, and they'll try anything. Did you ever hear of the Queensborough Bridge? Wilbur shook his head. Is it a web? Sort of, replied Charlotte. But do you know how long it took men to build it? 8 whole years. My goodness, I would have starved to death waiting that long. I can make a web in a single evening. What do people catch in the Queensborough Bridge? Bugs?